first virtual community briefing for our 2025-2026 Asian American Pacific Islander Community Development Fund. We're going to go ahead and really get into it. We have a lot of really exciting information to share, but I did want to do a couple of reminders. Again, if you haven't yet, put your name, your organization, your pronouns, and where your organization serves in the chat, just so we can get a sense of who's in the room with us. Again, we've been looking through the names and we see a bunch of folks that we've worked with before. Welcome again. Excited to have you here with us, but we also see a lot of folks who we haven't necessarily worked with before, and it's so good to see you folks as well. We hope you learn a lot and also learn a lot about CACF and our work. And before we really jump into it and start going through our agenda, I did want to do some quick housekeeping. We're going to address as many questions as we can, but we're holding questions and answering those questions till the end of our presentation. So if as we go through, if you see information that you have additional questions about, if there's something that we haven't talked about, just put it in the chat and we're going to go ahead and keep a list of all those questions that come through, and we will attempt to address all of them, including those questions you put in your registrations at the end of this presentation. So we do have a good amount of time for that, and we can also stay on as a team in case you have time to address any additional questions that come in. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and throw it to the newest member of our grants and contracts team. She joined, I want to say, last week. So we're just throwing her right in. Throwing it over to you, Adeline, to go through our agenda.
Hi, everyone. So for today's agenda, we're going to start off with the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families Grants and Contracts team intros. Next, we'll be going over the 2025 to 2026 AAPI CDF overview. Then we'll go over organizational eligibility, vetting, project areas, and budget. Next will be application and evaluation. Then we'll go over to our contact information. And at the very end, we'll go over questions and answers. Next slide, please. So I'll go ahead and start off with myself. My name is Adeline. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a Grants and Contracts Associate. I'll pass it over to Kit.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. So nice to see you all. I am Kit Talau, pronouns she, her, Senior Contracts Coordinator, and I will pass it to Francis.
Thank you very much, Kit, and good morning, folks. Great to see you all here. My name is Francis, pronouns he, him. I'm the Grants Coordinator, and I'll pass it back to Ambrosia.
And my name is Ambrosia Cowie. I go by she, they pronouns, and I'm the Director of Grants and Contracts here at CACF. Before we move on to talking a little bit more about our organization, we did want to introduce a couple other members of the Grants and Contracts team. We work hand in hand with each other really closely, and I know a lot of the organizations we work with touch CACF at different places. So we did want to just shout out the rest of our team here. We have Fiona Zhao, who is the Contracts Coordinator, Simon Lau, Fiona's the Grants Coordinator, Simon Lau, who's the Contracts Coordinator, Camilla Song, who's the Grants and Contracts Associate, and Juan Chen, who's the Contracts and Invoicing Coordinator. Again, we work really closely as a team, so if you are awarded CDF and you do begin work with CACF, you'll likely see these folks as well in the process of working with us. All right, so before we really jump into talking about CDF, we did want to make sure we spend a little bit of time talking about the Coalition for Asian American Children and Families. Again, acknowledging there's a number of different people in this space, some who are more familiar with CACF and some who are just joining. So we did want to share a little bit about our organization's work. We're the nation's only Pan-Asian children and families organization, bringing together community-based organizations as well as youth and community members to fight for equity for the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. The mission of CACF is to advocate for equity and opportunity for marginalized AAPI children and families, and our vision is for all children and families, including AAPIs in New York, to be safe, healthy, and able to reach their full potential in life. The way that CACF does this is we focus on three different pillars. Our first is our leadership development pillar, which is composed of the Asian American Student Advocacy Project, which is also known as ASAP. as well as our Social Justice Leadership Institute, which is inclusive of a lot of our healing center work. We also focus on membership and coalition building. So as part of that, we run the Asian American Crisis Relief Fund. We run Access Health NYC. We have a Thriving Patient Navigator program. And we have the Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund, which our team runs. Again, I know a number of you are familiar with that. And we actually just finished up that RFA process earlier this year, which is really exciting for us. It's in its 11th year, which is quite a long time. And finally, our last pillar is our policy and advocacy work. Again, CACF is a policy and advocacy organization, and we focus on budget equity through our 18% and growing and equity budget coalition campaigns. We focus on education equity, health equity, language access, child welfare, and data equity and disaggregation. So if you have any questions or want to be involved with CACF's work, please reach out to us. We're happy to talk through, and we're happy to connect you with the folks at CACF that can further answer some detailed questions if you have any. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on and throw it over to my wonderful colleague, Francis, to really start talking about our 2025 AAPI CDF cycle.
Thank you very much, Ambrosia, and good morning again, folks. So just to give a little bit of context and background about the 2025-2026 AAPI Community Development Fund. We know that folks received communications from us with our detailed RFA, but to try to just simplify a bit of that information you've received, first and foremost, as mentioned at the start of our presentation, this is our fourth consecutive cycle of launching the AAPI CDF award. And we're so excited and so grateful that, again, we can continue to work with our communities and continue to build our working relationships and partnerships together through this very critical and important fund. And also for the grants and contracts team, this is our opportunity to learn more about the critical and ongoing work that your organizations does in continuing to serve the AAPI communities throughout New York. So just to simplify what the purpose of this fund is. So for the AAPI CDF fund, this fund supports projects that holistically address hate, bias, and racism, holistically addresses mental health needs and increasing security awareness and trainings amongst the AAPI New Yorkers, and holistically providing critical social and health programs and services that promote the safety and overall well-being of our AAPI communities. Now, something we'd like to share, and I think this is exciting, especially since this is something we've heard from our past awardee recipients. What's exciting about the 2025-2026 AAPI CDF is that the time duration of this grant will actually be a little bit longer. So for this specific grant, it'll be 11 months. Unlike in our past cycles, it was roughly 6 to 7 months. So it's very nice that we have a bit more time to connect, cultivate, and collaborate together to work through this incredible grant opportunity, and also giving folks more time as they want to continue to build on with their projects and really develop the kind of project that, again, will reflect on the long-lasting impact and purpose. And also in the next slide, where we'll talk about organizational eligibility, there's one important criteria we definitely want folks to be mindful of, and especially because we really want to continue to develop our small and medium-sized orgs that, again, we want to be able to just expand on that capacity. So next slide, please. So in the RFA, you've probably seen a section of that where it lists the organizational eligibility. As you're planning to apply for the 25-26 AAPI CDF, we want to just clearly reiterate this part of the RFA. Consider it more as a checklist as you're doing your due diligence and making sure that your organization is eligible to apply. So of course, it's important to make sure that your 501c3 status is up to date for at least 2 years. And organizations with fiscal sponsors are also eligible to apply. Also, please make sure that you're in current registration with the Charities Bureau of the New York State Office of the Attorney General. Also, please make sure that again, that this grant award, this is not meant to be a re-granting purpose. This is more about directly serving the New York State residents. Of course, we want to make sure that as you're applying, please, again, this is for folks who have experience working with and outreaching to AAPI populations, and of course, demonstrating the commitment and capacity to deliver culturally competent services. Um, I want to raise, again, just two additional important points that we want folks to be very mindful of as you're thinking about and planning to submit your application. First and foremost, we want to reiterate and stress that there is an organizational budget cap. Oop, sorry. There's an organizational budget cap at 5 million. Again, we know that there's a lot of interested organizations out there that want to apply, but also we just want to make sure that, again, we're able to work and develop with those organizations, especially with the smaller, small and medium-sized orgs. Lastly, please also keep this in mind. If you're currently receiving a direct allocation through the 24-25 New York State equity budget, unfortunately, you're not eligible to apply for this grant award. So if any of these points, if you have any questions or immediate concerns, please reach out to the Grants and Contracts team. We are happy to clarify and answer any of those questions you have. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Francis. There is a vetting process, and applicants will be vetted by CACF, and they must be cleared in order for the applications to be considered. We will be checking the databases of IRS to make sure you have tax exempt status. And we'll also be checking the database of the New York State Department of State Corporations to make sure you are incorporated as a nonprofit in New York State, and that you are also currently registered with the New York State Charities Bureau. The next two agencies, the New York State Department of Labor and the Workers' Compensation Board, we will be reviewing the debarment list of the New York State Department of Labor to see if any applicants appear on this list. Now, organizations would not want to be on this debarment list. Is not ideal, but if you are, we can have a further discussion regarding your eligibility. The project budget is also part of the vetting process, and we carefully review your budget to make sure it is aligned with your proposed project and that all of your costs does make sense to support your project. And if you are using a fiscal sponsor, the vetting applies to your fiscal sponsor as well, and your fiscal sponsor will also need to pass the vetting. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Kit. So as you're reviewing the RFA, you'll probably notice another section and an even more detailed section, which is our project funding focus areas. So there are 8 work scope areas that you can choose from. You are more than welcome to choose one project area, just as long as, again, what your project proposal may be, making sure that, again, it clearly and directly aligns with the intentions of the CDF fund. Excuse me. But this is again, this is what makes this award great in terms of just giving folks that flexibility and opportunity to think about and decide how exactly they would like to frame their projects for the CDF award. And also just, again, in thinking of our past cycles and the awardees we've worked with, just thinking of the variety of projects we've come across and really a lot of the creativity and innovation behind the projects while continuing to address a very important and powerful message. If folks have any questions as you're reviewing the RFA with the details and some helpful examples in regards to each work scope, if you have any questions on any of those work scopes, again, we're happy to meet one-on-one and try to provide some clarification as you're navigating through this. Next slide, please.
So let's talk about budget. Your funding request is capped at $30,000. So the most you can ask for is $30,000. But please keep in mind that this is also contingent upon your annual budget, because your ask cannot exceed 35% of your annual budget. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you on that. If your organization does not have an operating budget at this moment, you can request up to $5,000. And of course, if you need more information, more support on that, please reach out to us as well. The AAPI Community Development Fund is a reimbursement-based award. So what this means is that you will need to pay for your project costs upfront before requesting for reimbursement. So please be aware of this, that it is a reimbursement-based award. And if you were to be awarded, you will need to spend down your full award amount. Next slide, please. So hopefully all of you have received the link to the application. Francis had sent an email out to all the organizations in January. And you can access the link to the application when we send out the Google slide copy to you. And the application has two parts. The first part is asking for your organizational background and information. And then the second part is about your project, the description, and the budget costing for your project. Next slide, please.
So this is another important question folks continually have asked us, which is, again, how exactly is the project proposal evaluated? What specific points are you looking for as you review? Well, we can just review what would make a strong application. First and foremost, just making sure that you have a focused, well-defined project proposal that aligns with at least one or more of the project areas that you identify. Of course, given that this fund holistically supports projects. Again, this one, make sure that your project proposal, it holistically addresses hate, bias, and any other key area that this fund focuses on in supporting and engaging and working with our AAPI communities. Making sure that you have a clear description and understanding of the community need, and trying to make a connection to your project proposal and the impact that it will have on the AAPI community, both now and long term. Also important to make sure that your project proposal, it demonstrates the linguistic and cultural capacity that your organization continues to do in terms of its work and services, along with just having that understanding of the cultural and linguistic needs that's served to the populations that your organization does. Next slide. So as mentioned in the earlier part of our presentation, so given that this fund is 11 months, so the starting period would be May 1st, and the ending project period would be March 31st, 2026. Please keep in mind, again, given the longer time period for this award, it's still important to keep in mind having a clear and realistic, achievable timeline with a clear proposed impact. Again, folks definitely throw out a lot of great ideas, but it's important to keep the realistic timeline in mind, given that even with the additional time you may have to complete this project, we definitely want folks to complete their project in time, and also just be considerate if there may be hurdles or challenges along the way. The last 2 points, of course, in conjunction with your having a clear, concise, and direct project proposal, it's important to also have a clear project budget that directly relates, and also making sure that the project costs are reasonable and that it's sufficient in terms of making sure that the project goals can be achievable and can be sustainable. Next slide, please.
So here is the timeline for the AAPI CDF application. We had released the RFA on January 21st, about 2 weeks ago. And here are the dates for the briefing. This is the first briefing that we are currently facilitating, and the next briefing will be on February 20th. Francis and I will also have office hours if you need support, if you have questions regarding the application. And that will take place the first week of March. And you can reach out to us now or anytime anytime by then to make an appointment with us. The deadline to submit your application will be March 10th at before 12 a.m. And this deadline is a hard deadline. We cannot give out extensions, so please be mindful of this March 10th deadline. The decisions will be sent out to applicants on April 25th. And as Francis had mentioned, the project start date until the completion date is 11 months, from May 1st to March 31st next year, 2026. Next slide, please. Here is our contact information. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Next slide. If you have any questions, you can come off mute to ask us, or also enter it in the chat, and we'll answer as best as we can.
All right. Thank you, folks. We already do have some questions. I've seen it come through the chat. And we also got some questions in the registration doc when you registered. So we're going to go ahead and answer all of those now. I'm going to start with the registration doc questions, just because I want to make sure that we get to them. We had one question come through. What are the deliverables? So the answer to that is that we have no deliverables for this specific award. As Francis explained, all of your proposals are reviewed. So you essentially will propose a project to us based on your experience and based on what you want to do with your community. And that is the project we'll assess. So we don't have anything specific that you have to meet with this award. We're really relying on your expertise and your knowledge and what you need. And that's essentially what your deliverables become, is based on what you're identifying within your community. We got another question through registration. Just wanted to know if $30,000 is the max amount, and the answer to that is yes. You can propose up to $30,000, and it cannot also exceed 35% of your organizational budget. And moving on to some of the questions that we saw in the chat, Marcelo asks, direct awards through the 24-25 New York State Equity Budget Criteria Coalition. To confirm, if our funding from New York State DOS Equity came through CACF, is my organization still eligible? Unfortunately, I'm going to disappoint you. If you are receiving 24-25 equity through CACF or AAF, so if you are working with Simon and Fiona on your equity award, you are not eligible for this funding. And the reason behind that is because they come from the same contract. So if you're receiving New York State DOS equity or AAPI equity through either CACF or AAF, you are unfortunately not eligible for a community development award fund because they come from the same funding pots. Bhavna asked, has the form changed from last year? If yes, could we get a Word or PDF of the form? Yes, the application has changed just a little bit. It's not significant, but we can 100% circulate both a Word and a PDF of the application questions. I see a hand. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing at this moment just so I can see folks. So I see a hand. Monu, when you're ready, you can come off mute and ask. All right. Keep your hand up, Monu. But I see another hand come up, Arash.
Okay, can you hear me,
Oh,
Manu?
yes. Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, okay, I'm using an interpreter, so it took a second. This is Manu, I'm the one that raised my hand. Okay, so I'm calling through a sign language interpreter today. I wanted to go ahead and raise a question during this meeting. So for the AAPI award, I wanted to see if I already applied last year, could I still apply this year?
Yes, that's a great question. So if you already applied for AAPI CDF last year, so if you're a 24-25 recipient, you can also apply again for the 25-26 cycle. Totally allowed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Arash, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. And it's good to see familiar faces. I can, we got this last year and it's been like such a tremendous building some muscle around some of the program we were already doing and what we had proposed. And so my question kind of was around, obviously we're thinking about applying this year. And to me, based on your presentation, it looks mostly similar to last year. So maybe my pointed question is maybe, are you looking for similar proposals? Obviously we were accepted and granted a pot of money last year. Are you looking for new things this year to do things differently? Yeah, maybe that's my question around it. Are you looking for more innovative or creative things? Or if, we were granted something last year, are we safe to assume that we should maybe build off what we proposed last year, for example?
That's a great question that I'm going to give a fuzzy answer to. So we're not essentially looking for anything. I think the way that CACF and our team specifically approaches grant making is we really rely on your knowledge and what your needs are. So I think the best answer I can give is whatever you're needing, I would say propose. And I think the key point around developing a proposal is making sure we're understanding the needs in your community and how your specific proposal is going to address that. And it could be a building off of what you've been doing. That's completely fine. It could be an expansion of what you're doing. It could be if you see emergent needs and there's something that you want to address with this specific money, that is also okay too. I think what we're really relying on is the communication of what you're wanting to do and how your project will address that and how that affects the community. I hope that was, if you have any follow-up questions to any of my answers, go ahead and put it in the chat and I'm happy to answer that. But I'm gonna shift over to the chat again since I'm not seeing any hands. Another question from Bhavna is, what is the total pot of money and has it increased from last year? The answer to that is yes, our total pot of money has increased from last year. The total is about 560 this year. I have a direct message, so I'm going to go ahead and read that out here. Are we eligible if you have received 2024 New York State DOS Social Services Award through AAF? That's a good question. Let me come back to you on that. I believe the answer is no, that you're not eligible, because I'm pretty positive that this is the same funding that is won by the Equity Budget Coalition. But let me double check on that, and I will email you back and confirm eligibility around that. I think the key thing around that, if you're receiving 24-25 DOS state equity funding, is it's the money that's won through the Equity Budget Coalition, which is co-led by CACF and AAF. So if you're receiving any part of that money, whether it's through CACF or through AAF, you're unfortunately not eligible for this, because again, it's the same pot of money, and CDF is specifically for those who are not already receiving that. Okay, I'm seeing more chat questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and answer that. This is a really good question, so thank you for uplifting it, Bhavna. Is this pot of money safe from the federal goings on, especially since it's reimbursement based? So this funding is 100% state funding, so it is not impacted directly by the things going on at the federal level. Let's see. I'm seeing more things come through the chats. One second. I have a question from Pragna that asks, would we get money halfway through? So I think this is a question around the payment schedule. Should you become an award, or should you be awarded by this grant? And the way that, if by this funding pot, and the way that payment works if you're funded through AAPI CDF is that you get a 25% advance payment on your award, and the rest of the money is reimbursement based. So you don't get money halfway through. You'll get a payment of 25% when you execute your subcontract. In the middle of the term, maybe once, maybe twice, we'll have to figure that out internally, but sometime in the middle of term, you'll be able to request a reimbursement on the cost that you spent during the first part, and that is optional. We understand that some people spend differently, so we just want to make sure that there's different points within the contract cycle that you're able to request reimbursement. So there'll be an interim reimbursement claim that you can request reimbursement of funding for, and then at the end of the contract. So it's typically about 2 weeks after the contract term ends. So in April, you'll be able to request reimbursement again against your funding. And just a reminder, this is reimbursement based. So you will have to spend costs upfront and request a reimbursement for those costs to be paid out. And again, if any of my answers are bring up more questions, please go ahead and put them again in the chat. Got a direct message that if we receive 2024-2025 AAPI funding through CACF or AAF, then you are not eligible. But then I thought you also said you could apply this year. Okay, so this is a terminology question, so bear with me. There's a couple of different pots. There's AAPI Community Development Fund, which is a fund that CACF runs. That, if you are an AAPI Community Development Fund awardee that got it in the 24-25 cycle, you are eligible to apply for this again. So if you're getting CDF funding, you can apply for CDF funding again, completely fine. There's another pot of funding called AAPI Equity Funding, which is not the same as Community Development Funding, Community Development Fund funding. If you're getting AAPI Equity Funding, and on CACF side, if you're working with Simon and Fiona, then you cannot receive CDF. I hope that's a little bit more, that provides a little bit more clarity. They're just two different pots that come from the same contract. So on CACF side, if you're working with CACF, if you work with Simon and Fiona, you cannot get CDF funding. And again, if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out or put it in the chat or come off mute. Love to talk with folks.
Can we get a copy of the slide presentation that you had today?
Yep.
Okay.
You absolutely will get a copy of the slide presentation, and you'll also get a link to the recording of this in case you want to refer back to it as you complete your application.
All right.
Any other questions that folks have?
When do you think you would be able to send out the PDF or the Word version of the application form?
Yeah, we'll send all of that out in a follow-up email. I think the longest wait time is probably getting this recording on YouTube, which is we can do pretty quickly. So we're aiming to get those resources out to you either by end of day today or tomorrow.
Will that also include the budget form and everything?
Yes, we can include the budget form in that as well. So
Great.
we can send out PDF, Word of the application questions. We can send out a recording of this. We'll send out the slides. We'll send out the budget template. And we'll also share the application link just so that's always on top of your email.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions that folks have? Again, you can put it in the chat or you can come off mute. I am seeing none. So I think what we will do is we can end this community briefing now.